Welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Uh, Please be sure to subscribe or follow us wherever you found this. And today we're going to get talking about Christ and his presence on this earth. Have you had any encounters lately, Kurt? Anything to share about Christ and his presence on the earth?
I guess I'll go back a couple weeks, referring to this corporate prayer session that I brought up before that you've been to with our hosts out of Colorado Springs, Colorado. But one of the gentlemen that joins us, he shared a couple weeks ago that that I was a part of a sequence of things where he said that he just appreciated how I welcomed him, into with that meeting, like saying hello, and the idea that, it gave him the thought that if he wasn't there, he'd be missed. And he had a couple other things in that sequence of days where that happened. So he really felt that this was, his divine connection, because he's been going through some things with health and just personally and emotionally and so forth. So he kind of felt that I was a part of a sequence of things that Christ or God was trying to talk to him, and it kind of helped him come back in swing of his life. So no matter how we interpret that testimony, um I think just that idea of being attentive and being ready to what that voice is, and being in touch with I guess some say the non-secular, that stuff that drives your life, the stuff in Christ talk, where you got the stuff in everyday life, that secular component, then you got the non-secular. So having that connection to source, to God, and have that relationship, so like here with Christ talk, you know, to not be afraid to ask, Christ for help, to, speak to him as a brother, and to say, hey, I need your help. And it seemed like that was a little bit of what he was going through. And I've been there before. And I think you're doing this show because you've been there before. Uh,
Definitely.
yeah.
And I
And
think each of us won't just go there once, but we'll have different seasons in life, just like the Bible says that um, as followers of Christ, we will have good and bad seasons in life. We'll have trials and tribulations. So, yes, we'll have Him to help us through life and to answer our prayers and so forth. We'll have Him to worship, but also we will, in the midst of serving Him, not just have all this glory, but we'll have hardships. We'll have trials and tribulations. And I believe right now that I'm in one of those bad seasons, but I believe that God is using me too. Uh, I've been a victim of 3 different crimes in the last 4 weeks. A little bit, I guess more like 6 weeks, but still, uh, to me, that shows that crime has gone up, which is a secular concern. Um, but it's also shown to me that with my faith staying solely set on Christ, here I used these experiences and put twists on them to have now 3 additional books I have started writing. So there was a gift in it, like a blessing, that the idea, the drama that's fictional stories are developing. So, especially if these end up being bestsellers, then I'd be like, okay, God, I'm ready for another hardship. But there's a gift in everything. I mean, if you really think about it, right? was a silver lining in the pandemic we all went through, as far as now having more stuff like this, as remote work from home jobs are legitimate. I mean, there's even stuff like the pandemic that hurt the whole world in some way, some more than others. There were still silver linings in it. So yes, it's very sad we lost those millions of lives, but look at all the things we got out of it. But I think that goes with to go ahead, Emily. Yeah, I'm having a hard time dealing with it, but part of my coping skill, you know how we were talking in the mental health awareness coping skills? Part of mine is twisting the story to be some kind of happy ending, with on my side being the happy ending using fictional names. That's one of my tactics of writing my fictional books that also is a coping skill for me. Yeah. I mean, I don't even know how I landed the idea of writing books because I've been writing quote books since I was in fourth grade. But in fourth grade, that could be one page with 2 sentences. But yeah, I mean, even with that, there, God had my hand moving at an early age because He destined me to, at some point in my life, to be an author. Even though y'all know that I used to have a tutoring company, but with the writing I did, I was able to tutor math. So it's it's been a blessing He's given me that has blossomed in many ways to help the lives of other people. But like you're saying, you encountered some of those, Kurt, where something you did, like you were saying with the prayer group on Fridays that we have at 9 Central, that you were just simply doing what you do and it touched a life. And then God was using that method of you doing what you do to touch that life. He was behind the scene in control.
Yeah, I mean, I think what it amounts to is, this reference to, when two or more gather in his name, and the idea of discernment and, in these group activities, there is a power in that. And, there's these unsuspecting ways, that he is working through us. I had, you've been at the meetings. I'm not always trying to play that role of welcoming somebody, and so it's not like I
No, and I
do
know
that
you're
every
not, but
week.
that's why we know that there was a divine behind it, because at one time it's something happened, even though you were just being you.
Yeah, it was just being you, but yeah, something was natural there, that when I considered like the conversation, and and that when I made a remark his direction, I had no idea that was going on. So it's a very profound experience to hear the testimony of what I did, that it's like I have to be reminded of the moment and be like, oh yeah, I guess I did say that, whatever. And then to hear how it was a part of, a sequence of how, he had that experience of being spoken to, through us. You say kind of like you can see the presence of Christ in the eyes of others and so forth.
Or the
You know,
actions.
yeah, the actions and what's said, so that's where, it is an interesting practice to consider what we say. Because if we're in a good discernment, a prayerful consideration, and then if you let him speak through you, and in your connection with him, relationship with Christ, and you act by his example and in relationship with him, it's just amazing what happens. Because it's just, the way your mind operates, and the way you just feel, and you start considering and participating, the way you listen, things kind of take a little different nuance. Again, when you're letting that non-secular component kind of play into what we're doing in something that's an everyday thing or an every week thing, like a weekly prayer session.
Well, but also think, looking at what you're saying, that you may never know you affected them. How many of us may have been on podcasts and we affected listeners that we never knew? Neither did we ever know we impacted. Right. And we could have just been joking. Yeah, they may know you, but you don't know them, kind of idea. And so you could be impacting them all the time with, like, my idea, just go to Starbucks for a coffee. And like, remember I told you about cameras being on me. Okay. Well, apparently for them to want to take a picture of me, I must have impacted them in some way or another, right? There's some kind of meaning they have. So we could even have stuff like that. That's everyday people, as, a president, a public speaker, a college president, um, all kinds of business owners and so forth, that they can affect the community through providing jobs, in addition to uh, the way they impact the customers or clients. It could even be as simple as the waitress impacting that customer that she waits on. I mean, it's just, even in our jobs, we can impact one another and not even intend it or know it. We may be just trying to keep our job, or just doing whatever's our role or obligation, and somehow we impact life. Because even in those ordained times, the ordinary times, we impact one another. And for those of us who know Christ, that means we're showing his love by being a good waitress at the restaurant, or a good cashier, good to their customers, and so forth. Anybody have anything to add?
Well, I guess what I'll share is, kind of a topic within this that we tend to grab at, maybe outside of the show, but again, with the work that I do at the Disability Channel, and we think of disability advocacy and integration, and kind of, in sacred scripture, kind of where there are stories, in the books of the Bible and so forth, about the work of Christ with people with disabilities in that time. And then I've said before about the verse about, what you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. And then, it looks like we got John here trying to knock on the door to come on stage. Excellent. So, but in any case, I kind of pointed out before how that to me is more reflection on people and the secular side of things than it is on the divine side, or non-secular side. To me, when you really get to, the ultimate in existence of people like humankind, to me, there is no, inequity. There is no greater or less than, when you really get down to it, at least as far as we're concerned, you know, there's a lot of message to not judge another. But yet, I think, I for sure have been guilty to, in my, 50 years of life, I think I unfortunately have judged people and had that affect, what I've done in a moment and so forth. Obviously, I don't try to do it in the long run, but I think for some reason I've been a part of this, that once in a while, when if you want to call it a moment of weakness or whatever. But in all of this, on the scope of as far as the people with disabilities, I've routinely said that to really get this to where it could be, in the work of it, to think of, yes, faith life, like we're talking here, but then you have service life, lifelong learning, how it fits within government. And there's something to be said how our faith life can help what we consider being a constituent of our government agency work, and then all the fun things, that we do in life, helping people just have joy and happiness and recreate, all that kind of stuff. But in this realm, and thinking of from the faith side of this, or with what the show is, I just offer to share about ability ministry. So in disability advocacy, disability ministries is something that I've looked into and I participated in disability ministries. And then in the work that I do, I kind of give it that ability spin. Like at the Disability Channel, it's showcasing abilities. And then there's Ability MK Now and World of Ability. And so in the ministry side, I make that what we do as well is to say it's ability ministry, and to have people think of, so here at Christ Talk, I say, how are we doing the work of Christ, by and through and in openness to 100% of people. And in terms of faith spaces too, do we feel
What's
that
the
the faith spaces that we go to, are they doing a good job to welcome in everyone that could be coming into these gathering spaces?
Tell us about this abilities ministry that's for people with disabilities. Is that something you're starting, or what's the news about it? What is it?
Well, as I share about ability ministry, I think like if you look on Google and whatever, I think you can find other people who coincidentally are also working in this mantra of ability ministry. But for me, it was inspired on my own because of working with disability advocates. Like one of our friends, was the first one to teach me about the idea of, hey, look at my ability and not as much on my disability. Not that, he was kind of like, he's proud of his disability. His life, wouldn't be as great as it is if it weren't for his disability. But in terms of, to me, he was speaking to stigma. I think people kind of, make it the whole thing about disability advocacy where it's like, avoid using the label of disabled or something like that. So that's what I learned. I learned to think about what is there and what somebody can do, their ability versus their disability. So I created Ability Fest, which again, coincidentally, there were other organizations using this mantra of Ability Fest. But like in disability ministries, there's an organization in disability ministry that has a whole program for creating a disability friendly church, and so forth. And I know, like, I come from the Catholic Church. And so in Catholic Church, there's a program that is geared to create a ministry that is done with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And the priests at Mass and, people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are incorporated in the Mass process, the experience, specifically as, an element of the disability ministry. So it's anything where you sit down to the table and you say, hey, with our faith community, what can we do to be more accessible and friendly and welcoming and to be more what somebody with a disability would have in mind when they're looking at, like, to say here, Christ Talk, or whatever it is in faith spaces, prayer sessions, Bible studies, a church service, the logistics of it, how sermons are delivered, what clergy is doing, is everything making it a level playing field, how ministry and faith is practiced as it would concern someone with a disability, that even in terms of church leadership, are we finding that people with disabilities have a great chance to be a leader within the faith community? Or is that unheard of, that someone with a disability is a pastor, clergy, or, other leadership roles,
Well, I
administrative?
could say locally to me in the Houston area, a lot of the most predominant churches are the largest and even have international ministries such as on TV and whatnot. They do not welcome people with disabilities. I and a few other people with autism alone have got kicked out of that one church. And the pastor of it is one of the richest pastors, top 10 richest pastors in the US. And so I have found one church that welcomes people with disabilities and actually has what they call their special needs ministry. But that seems to be a scarce thing, at least where I live. And so it is something that I could at least say, based on the Houston area, we need these ability ministries you're talking about. We need more of them, and we need to help the ones that are there grow so they can reach the places that have special needs people, but not special needs ministries. Because, like you're saying, we can all be part of the body, but in different ways, based on what are our abilities versus disabilities or lack of disabilities.
Yeah, I actually also served on the board of a disability ministry. But the premise of this one disability ministry was to minister and be a nonprofit and be of service, almost like in a respite sense, where it's like creating that ministry and the role of the faith community for parents or guardians of people with disabilities, because in the realm of community and in families and in the lives of children and adult with parents and so forth, guardians, that there's quite a bit of an unmet need there, to look at helping life be more practical for parents and guardians of children with disabilities. So that for sure applies to faith space, to look at how many parents or guardians are affected in having a reasonable chance to participate in a service, or to participate in a Bible study, or to participate in a prayer group, whatever it may be, all these faith experiences, that there is a little bit of the culture stacked against parents and guardians of children with disabilities, because that life role has its challenges and is tough in terms of keeping your energy up and managing activities, keeping everything straight. So the mental toll, the emotional toll, the physical toll, that can be there. I mean, obviously, it's not a situation for everybody, but it's a deeply underserved reality for life in general. And it was a great experience to see a nonprofit serve that from the interests of a faith community and faith experiences for parents and for parents and guardians of children with disabilities.
All right, John, well, you're in here. We haven't heard anything from you. What do you have to say?
I'm just listening. I think what Kurt said earlier, and I'm not real good at it, I'll have to admit, but many times when we're trying to service somebody, um, I have a tendency to answer before I really listened, right? Um, I think um, when it comes to dealing like with an argument, not an argument, but like an apologetics, we have a tendency to want to get out what we have to
Debate?
say before we listen to what somebody else says.
Are you talking about a
And
debate?
uh, say that again?
Are you talking about a debate?
Yeah, like a debate. But even when there's people that have a problem, I have a tendency to answer or talk before I have a chance to really listen to what, especially if they're having a hard time communicating and they're trying to speak from the heart. I got to remind myself not to interject too soon and to just quiet down and listen, because I think when sometimes people are talking, God talks through other people too. And sometimes if you're just quiet and listening, then he gives you a way to answer how he would want you to answer. So that's what I'm practicing now, is being quiet a little bit more and listening with both ears instead of just one. Um, a second thing, and this came to my mind too, on how we can um, talk to other people. My wife and I started a couple years ago of when we go to a restaurant, and when the waiter, or the usually it's a girl, she'll come up and take your order, but we usually say to her, I'm a Christian and we're here having dinner. Is there something we can pray for you for? And I'll be honest with you, it's an amazing response because they're not ready for it. Here they are working and they're on their feet for a whole period of time. And then when you come away quietly without, trumpeting that you're a Christian or anything, but just saying, hey, we'd like to place our order, but is there something we can pray for you for? Um, and I can't tell you how many times waitresses have broken down and started crying. And there was some really heavy duty things that were going on in their life. But you have no idea of that. You're coming in to get a meal, and they're they're human and they're going through all kinds of stuff. And um, many times they say to us, no one's ever said that to us. No one's ever asked us if we're okay, or what's going on in our life. So when they go to take the order, sometimes we pray for them right there, but sometimes we don't want to embarrass them inside the restaurant, and then they'll go and place the order, and then sometimes Monica and I pray for them before the meal comes out. So I think you just gotta be careful with that too. But so we have had amazing luck about that, and not luck, but God. And I know when you do that the first couple times, um, you're wondering, how is this going to be taken? Is this going to be taken in a spirit of love? So, anyways, I would suggest all you guys try it sometime. Just try it once. But I think the answers can be pretty powerful, and you'll probably do it again and again. There's times we go into the restaurant and we forget all about it. I don't think it's something that would work like in a fast food place, but it's something like you're sitting down and you've got a waitress
That's
that's
what I
coming
was
up.
thinking. Because I was thinking in the fast food, they probably just go, 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 go. They don't want you to have time to talk versus what you're saying in the sit down.
right. But on a sit down, they do, and so I think each situation is different. And, sometimes when you walk in the door, um, my wife and I talk to each other in a car and say, well, let's try it today. But when you walk into the door of the restaurant, you go, okay, where shall we sit? You know what I'm saying? Because you have no idea if you're going to sit at the right place that somebody has a situation where they need to have a prayer. So,
Or
and
even when you may sit down with somebody who needs a prayer, but is reluctant to it because they're right battling in denial of Christ or something like that, like a spiritual battle.
um, I'll be honest with you, we haven't had that problem. We haven't run into many situations like that. Many times they're just ready to. It's such a surprise to them that somebody would come in and do that, and then just quietly say it, so not everybody can hear it. But it's just, and like I said, you gotta, when you walk in the door, you try to figure out, okay, Lord, guide me to the right table. That would be the right waitress, and most of the time they're so surprised they stand there for a minute and they think and they go, well, actually, I do have something that you can pray for me about. And then other times, there's been times a waitress has just broken down and started crying right there. Um, so from our experience, it seems like not 85% of the time they have something they want to talk about. And you can always tell too if somebody is not into it or doesn't have something, and then you just move on. You figure out what you want to order and then order it right away. So it's kind of an interesting deal, something to try.
Speaking of God and interaction, have you had any experiences where you encountered God recently or Him at work?
Yeah, you guys.
Tell the
Um,
story so our listeners will understand.
well, when we were trying to get this off the ground, and I didn't know if you guys were Christian or not, and I didn't want to barge in on a moment, and I really didn't know what this was all about. Now I have a lot more a good feeling about all of it. I really believe. My wife actually works at Hobby Lobby. She works part time there, and she has a lot of opportunity to talk to people about Christ. She comes home and tells me about different visitations she's had with different people. Like there were, I think it was what day was that? I think it was Thursday, and she was in there, and a lady that had just moved in not too far from where we live or the Hobby Lobby there came in. She was a stylist, and she uh, cut hair for women, and she had a studio where there were four other that she owned, and that there was four other people, other women that were cutting hair. And she just started talking to her, and the lady told her she had a shop, and my wife needed to have a haircut also. But in their course of conversation, she found out she was a Christian. So they started talking about the Lord and then talking about a bunch of different things. And my wife then, the next day, went and had a haircut by her. And she said she became like a fast friend, but we talked about the Lord a lot. So she has, because she is in a public place where I just work out of my home. Um, so I don't have the opportunity like she does. So she comes back and tells me about that. But when I used to have, and I used to go, I had a painting contracting business, and I used to run in and talk to people all the time, So you just never know. So did that answer your question, Jennifer?
Just kidding. I said, yes, that does answer the question. But it sounds like we need to time have your wife come on here to talk more in depth about these encounters, because it sounds like basically God is using her a lot to reach these other people that are shoppers at Hobby Lobby, if nothing more than a shopper. Maybe even some coworkers or her boss or whoever, but these are good stories. Maybe if it
Yeah,
works through her schedule, she can join us sometimes and be one of our guests.
yeah, she comes back and she tells me some amazing stuff sometimes. She's got to be somewhat careful but Hobby Lobby is a Christian organization, but I don't think they want you to spend too much time, but they don't really watch her real carefully, and nobody when they come in there. But she does share with other employees that work there. Though Monica is very open. She likes to talk about um, all kinds of visitors and people coming in to talk, and she's also very careful too. She doesn't want to, like you said, sometimes you run into somebody um, and they have something against, let's say, Christianity or religion or whatever. Um, Actually, I was starting to build a website for a lady that was a pet. She brought in pets, and then she was like a pet rescue. And at first, I thought we might have a lot in common about Jesus Christ, but it turned out she was very negative, kind of like you brought it up. She was raised as a preacher's kid, and she had heard all the stories and everything like that. So when I tried to talk to her a little bit about it, she got really offended, and and
Do you mean
so
defensive?
yes, she was very contentious. Um, and I was trying to explain to her, and she would interrupt constantly. So she had come from a background. Uh, Her father was a preacher, and she was raised in a very a very strict home, and that when she had questions and stuff like that, her parents, her dad especially, um, didn't want her to talk much, or because kids have a lot of questions. They have a million questions that they want to ask, and if you shut that down on them, they have a negative effect to that. Um, I know with my grandson, he's 25 years old now, but when he was about 12, 13 years old, um, sometimes I would pick him up and take him to church. But sometimes I would just talk about Jesus and talk about some hard stuff. If we got out of church, I would say, "Okay, what did you learn today, or do you have a question specifically?" And if it was a tough question, I would say, "You know what? That's pretty tough." And there's sometimes when we run into people and we're having a debate, someone will ask a question, and it'll be kind of tough. And the best way to deal with that is to say, you know what, that's a really good question. I'm not so sure how to answer that. Could you give me a day or two to think about it, or somebody I can talk to or look it up? I got an idea what the answer might be, but I'm not absolutely positive. And then I tell them too. I said I need to talk to God myself and ask what He would want me to say. So every once in a while, there's some really tough stuff like that that you have to go through and deal with, you know. So it just stretches you. I think a lot of people are scared of debating or apologetics because sometimes it's over their head or they don't know how to answer a specific question. You know, how many times have we been in a service? I listen to John MacArthur all the time, but there's other people, our local preacher too, and that he will be talking about something. Um, I know this weekend we had a chance. My grandson and I were talking, and then my daughter-in-law, Candace, who's a Christian too, and we all three of us go to a different church. So we have a chance to talk with each other. And my grandson just graduated with a degree, and he's a IT guy, but he also got a divinity. So he, and then we were talking about something that was really kind of tough. Uh, he's really intelligent, and the classes that he was taking, they were um, they were things that he'd have to write a paper about. That was kind of a tough thing. And then on two different occasions, he called me up and he said, "Hey, Grandpa, this is an interesting question. What do you think?" And then I find that we're bouncing things off of each other and we're trying to figure out. And then we go back to the Bible, and is it a place that's just in one place in the Bible, or is it in a couple of places? And if you can look in a couple places, then it will the answer will be right there too. I think God wants you to do some research um, and to try to understand, because you know God's God. How does He deal with a lot of situations? You know. Um, so I find myself talking with my grandson and my daughter-in-law, everything from abortion. And my daughter-in-law has four daughters, and one is 20, one is 18, and the other one is 15. And there are times that we talk I freely, and I said I've asked my son and my daughter-in-law, can I talk to the girls about abortion? You know, I'm the grandfather, but I still have to respect what where they're at. And they say no, talk about it with them. You know, they were homeschooled. My daughter-in-law would be someone that would be terrific to have on this program here. And then maybe one of my grandchildren, the 20-year-olds, you know, because
Yeah,
they were.
let's definitely talk about that and see if both of them want to be or rotate. Definitely, we want to hear what they have to say, especially about the Lord or other topics as well.
Yeah, my daughter-in-law Candace is a professional photographer. I kind of when we at about 15 years ago, I kind of taught everybody in the family. I'm sorry, go back about 20 years, but I taught everybody, my sons and my daughter-in-law, how to be professional photographers, and then we actually opened up a photography studio. We did portraits and stuff, but mostly what we did was wedding photography. So, um, um, and then going to weddings and a perspective on weddings is, if you're a believer in God, is very interesting too, because I know there were times when we'd photograph a wedding, and they're usually always in a church of some sort, and then I would, you know, think about the people that are getting married, and then I would think, you know, is some of the churches were very. I did weddings in Mennonite churches, Catholic churches, Greek Orthodox, um, uh, even a Muslim wedding, Mormon weddings, you know, and to be a part of that and to see that, I really got an education. Uh, and I was doing that wedding photography back in Illinois before I became a Christian. And so it was interesting, my perspective. I went places that most people didn't. So, and then if you're at a wedding, especially, um, it was interesting how I'm trying to. find the right way to say this, but um, I would be, uh, because I was a rather nasty atheist myself, but I would just be open and listen and try to understand where they're coming from. Um, and this was way before I became a Christian myself. So I actually thought about a lot of stuff later. Um, what does this mean? Where does this go? Are these people legitimate? Are they in it for the money? Um, are they? Do they seem to be nice people? Um, because the couple that's getting married are probably younger than a lot of the parents that are there, or the church elders that are there too. You know, so I was actually given a back door to a lot of churches. And a lot of people don't realize that if you're a photographer or even a videographer for a wedding, you're going to places in ceremonies that most people don't have a chance to do. But I did. And then, uh, and then there was times that we would always photograph our weddings with two photographers. One would shoot portraits and the other one would shoot photojournalism. One would pose people and the other wouldn't, just photograph things that were going on in the wedding and have to be ready for it. But we would drive to the reception together and said, "Hey, what did you think about what the preacher said, or what the bride and groom said?" And I'll be honest with you, sometimes they were supposed to be real religious couple, or thought you did, but something would happen, and you could usually tell if the bride and groom were just going through the motions, or if they were doing this for their parents, or if they were really into it themselves. So I am sorry if I went off the mark here a little bit, but I'm just kind of going through
No, it's
my,
very good content. No, you have some great stuff to point out.
yeah. Um, my mother was also a wedding cake designer. She would make 3 and 4 wedding cakes and then deliver them on a Saturday. This was back in Illinois, in a suburb called Waukegan. She was very, very successful. And that's really, I had started taking photographs in high school, and I was like the yearbook photographer and things like that. But I would many times deliver her cakes for her. And so there was it sometimes it freaked me out because I was trying to deliver a cake, a wedding cake, and then you're worried about getting in an accident, right?
Was
But
this anything related to how you found Christ or how you see Christ working today? Like when you're looking back at stuff like this?
oh yeah, because of how I found Christ is I photographed a wedding for um, a Catholic man, and he was marrying a Jewish girl, and they had a rabbi and a Catholic priest there to marry him. And I remember going to that, and it was very interesting how they tried to meld the two together, because these two obviously really loved each other, but she was very Jewish and he was very Catholic. And I remember thinking at the time, well, how's this going to work? And I was an atheist, right? So, um, and that was a question I always had too. Can an atheist marry a Jew or a Christian? Um,
Well, it depends upon which aspect, because legally, yes, but the Bible is what says that we must be e equally yoked. Thou shalt not be unequally yoked with unbelievers,
right,
meaning that a Christian is only marry another Christian that is also strong in faith and dedicated to the Lord. So, and some people say Catholics are not Christian because they don't believe in just the Holy Trinity, but they like pray to Joseph and Mary and all the other stuff. So it can be debatable. about Catholic being Christian or not, but either way, that the Bible says for those who are Christians that we're to only marry other Christians.
Right, and I second that because my wife and I, her and I have talked many times and said, if I wasn't a Christian, and what would you talk about? Monica and I talk about some really deep stuff. We have like a debate with each other, not like an argument, but something that we're
Controlled
going back.
debate.
Yeah. And I say, what do you think about this? What do you think about it? And then we go back and forth. But we have a number of non-Christian people that don't believe in God that are friends from the past. And I always ask her, what do you think in their deep, quiet times together, what do they talk about? You know, obviously, if they're a family, they talk about their kids and their children and their welfare, talk about work. But if you're talking about like culture stuff, and we bring that up all the time, we look at what's going on in the world and the culture and the division within our country, and liberal versus conservative. We ask, oh, what do you think is going through their mind? And then she goes, because she was an atheist, not like I was, but she was a non-believer at one time. And then we'll say, well, remember when you were in this place, what were you thinking about? How would you handle this? When it comes to something like abortion, my wife and I, and I'll say it right here, her and I have been through this on our own. She had an abortion at one time, and I actually dealt with abortion with a couple of my girlfriends. Once I became a Christian, I realized my whole worldview was wrong, and I had to have a Christian worldview. But both of us have become very anti-abortion now. But at one time, we promoted it. So talk about a strange turnaround. You know what I'm saying? Uh, so, anyways, sometimes Monica has run into some girls that are thinking about an abortion. And so she'll be, it's better to come from her because she's a woman also that has done this thing. And so, you know, I think God has wanted to use her on a number of occasions to administer to somebody like that has been there and sees it from both directions. So, you know, when you're talking about somebody our age, we're both 70 years old, we've got a wealth of life problems that we have gone through. And then, like Monica always says, she's talking to girls about dating and saving yourself, you know, and she's had these talks with our granddaughters about saving themselves for the right guy because our culture thinks that's really old fashioned and
You're
stuff.
talking about the waiting until marriage, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So, and then, but she is very free with that information with young girls that she might meet that she starts talking about it too, you know, because she's been through all this kind of stuff when she was a kid or a young girl, you know, and didn't save herself, you know. And then you got me, who is, you know, and it's so much different when you're dealing with a teenage girl, with a teenage boy, or young individual. So, there are so many complications, but I think if you're quiet and you ask questions, I think that's the big deal. Is don't be afraid to ask questions. And if you don't have an answer for it, just say, "Hey, can I get back to you on this?"
Very
Because
good.
you will run into something. That's how I got into apologetics, and I started dealing with um, different things through scripture and stuff. But then the big argument, the big thing that you're talking about is evolution now, and that's where I have really devoted a lot of study and time into evolution. Is it real? Is it possible? And then listening to different scientists and finding out what is really the truth about it. You know,
Well,
so
we're out of time, but that definitely is something to note is your findings on this research. I want to note that for 2 Mondays away. Next Monday is Thanksgiving, so I mean it's the Monday before Thanksgiving, so we will not be on here. But what's the second Monday away from today? Let's pick up there. And right now, we're turning it to Emily. Do you have any announcements, John?
no, no. So what you were saying is 2 weeks from today. And did you want me to talk about what I've found out about evolution and stuff?
All that research on our next Jaws Christ Talk. That's in two
Okay.
Mondays.
O- Okay.
And as far as announcements, everybody, we are looking for a social media manager. If you think you're the candidate for it, please get on our calendar via calendly.com/Jens Books and More. That's calendly.com/JENNS Books and More. We are also looking for a virtual assistant uh, to do a lot of executive assistant tasks as well as podcasting assistance with the recordings and so forth. If you feel that you're a great candidate for this, you too also please go to calendly.com/Jens Books and More. That's calendly.com/JENNS Books and More. So whichever position you're interested in, we ask that you go to our Calendly to get on our schedule for an interview. And if this is not you, then we ask that you share it with somebody who you think may be interested or a possible candidate. Uh, Please also subscribe to our podcast on your favorite app at Jaws Coffee Chat. And be sure to check out our website where you'll find books that I, Jennifer A. Whitaker, have written. Um, that's www.jensbooksandmore.com. And to you, Emily.
Done.